I can still taste the rosemary in that first stew she fed me. It was October 1952 when Thomas and I arrived in Millbrook, a village so remote the postal service only came Wednesdays. Our cottage was small, damp, and smelled of the previous tenants' desperation to leave. Mrs. Hargrove appeared at our door before we'd finished unpacking. She didn't knock. I just looked up from a box of linens and she was there, framed in the doorway. A small woman, brittle as a bird, but her eyes were sharp and dark as polished stones. "You'll be wanting a proper meal," she said. Not a question. New arrivals never bring enough provisions. Thomas started to decline, but my stomach betrayed me with a growl. Mrs. Hargrove smiled. Her teeth were remarkably white for a woman of her years. "Just next door," she said, pointing a finger that seemed to have too many joints. "Come at 6. She left before we could properly accept or refuse, moving with a strange gliding step that made no sound on our creaking floorboards. I noticed she never looked back. Most people do when they feel eyes on them. The thing I remember most about that first dinner was how the cottage smelled rich, meaty, almost overwhelmingly savory, with an undercurrent of something sweet and wrong. Mrs. Hargrove's home was dim despite the lamps, every surface cluttered with objects that seemed to absorb light. The table was set for 3. I always set a place for my Harold, she explained, ladling thick brown stew into chipped china bowls. Keeps his memory fresh. He's been gone these 8 years now. The stew was incredible. I've spent 70 years trying to forget how good it tasted. The meat was tender, seasoned with herbs I couldn't quite identify. Thomas had 2 bowls. I stopped at one, not because I wasn't hungry, but because Mrs. Hargrove watched every bite I took with an intensity that made my throat tight. "You like it," she said. Not a question. She hadn't touched her own bowl. I can always tell when someone appreciates good meat. It's in the eyes. She demonstrated, her own eyes sliding shut, her papery lips parting. When she opened them again, she was looking directly at me, and I felt something cold slide down my spine. My Harold used to love my cooking. Before he left, the war years were hard here. The village was cut off for months during the worst of it, the famine. We made do with what we had. Thomas asked about the war, but Mrs. Hargrove never stopped looking at me. "The trick to good meat," she said suddenly, "is in the preparation, and in choosing the right cut. Some flesh is sweeter than others. Depends on how the creature lived, how it died." She smiled then, and I saw that her teeth weren't quite right. Too sharp at the canines. Too many of them. I made an excuse about feeling faint. As we reached her door, she called out, "Come back Tuesday, dear. I'm making my special recipe." That night, I lay awake listening to sounds from the cottage next door. Scraping, like something heavy being dragged across a floor, and beneath it, a sound like humming. Thomas slept soundly beside me. I never told him that when I'd used Mrs. Hargrove's washroom, I'd glimpsed through a gap in the floorboards down to her cellar, seen hooks hanging from the ceiling beams, seen dark stains on the stone floor, spreading out in patterns that looked like they'd been there for years, layered over and over. And I never told him that when I'd turned to leave, I'd caught my reflection in her medicine cabinet mirror and seen, standing behind me in the dim hallway, Mrs. Hargrove's face pressed against the crack in the door, watching me with an expression of such pure, patient hunger that my blood turned to ice. She'd known I'd seen the cellar, and she'd smiled. The village talked in whispers. I learned this my first week in Millbrook, standing in the queue at the butcher's shop. The women ahead of me were discussing someone named Peter Morley, a drifter who'd been staying at the boarding house. "Just like the others," one said. "Here one day, gone the next. Didn't even collect his wages. Always the loners," another whispered. "The ones with no family asking after them. They fell silent when they noticed me, their faces closing like shutters." Thomas dismissed my concerns. People come and go. Nothing sinister about it. But I'd seen the way the villagers looked at Mrs. Hargrove when she passed them on the lane. How they'd crossed to the other side. How mothers pulled their children indoors when her shadow fell across their doorsteps. I started noticing the animals first. Mrs. Gregson's tabby cat vanished. Then the vicar's old terrier, found dead with its throat torn but nothing eaten. A farmer's prized hen went missing from a locked co-op. Mrs. Hargrove invited us to dinner twice more that week. Each time, her stew was somehow different but equally delicious. And each time, she watched me eat with that same devouring intensity while her own bowl sat untouched. "You're looking thin, dear," she said on Wednesday, reaching across to pat my hand. Her fingers were ice cold despite the cottage's warmth. "You need to eat more. Build up your strength." Her cellar door was now secured with a heavy padlock. On Sunday after church, I finally spoke with the vicar's wife. Mrs. Pemberton was a nervous woman with kind eyes and hands that never stopped moving. "Mrs. Hargrove," she repeated when I asked, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Oh dear. How often have you dined with her?" "3 times. Your husband mustn't go back. Nor should you. Find any excuse." "Why? What happened to her husband?" Mrs. Pemberton glanced around, then pulled me behind the vestry wall. "Harold Hargrove didn't leave. This was during the war. The winter was brutal, and we were cut off. People were starving. But Mrs. Hargrove never seemed to suffer, never seemed thin, and Harold started wasting away, like something was consuming him from the inside. Bite marks that his wife claimed were from fevered dreams. Then one March morning, he simply wasn't there anymore." "What did the police say?" "My husband found her burning Harold's clothes that night, scrubbing bloodstains from her cellar floor. And the smell from her chimney the next few days," Mrs. Pemberton's face twisted with disgust. "Like the butcher's shop, but sweeter. Wrong." The constable questioned her, but there was no body. No evidence. "Has anyone else gone missing?" "Every few years. Always travelers. The boarding house had a tenant last spring, a surveyor. He disappeared after accepting one of her dinner invitations. Some said her hunger was born in those famine years. That once you've tasted certain things, you can never be satisfied with ordinary meat again. That it changes you." I felt my stomach turn, remembering the rich taste of her stew. "The rosemary," I said suddenly. "She uses a lot of rosemary." Mrs. Pemberton's face went white. "To mask the flavor." "Oh God. You didn't. How much did you eat?" "Just 1 bowl. But Thomas had 2 servings each time." "Keep him away from her." "That night, I told Thomas everything. He laughed it off, but I saw the unease in his eyes." "We'll decline the next invitation politely," he said finally. The next invitation came that very evening. Mrs. Hargrove knocked just as dusk was settling, holding a covered dish. "I've brought you something special," she said, offering it. "My special recipe. The one I've been preparing for someone who can truly appreciate it." She looked directly at me, and in the failing light, I swear her eyes reflected the lamplight like an animal's. Thomas thanked her and took the dish. The smell made my mouth water and my stomach heave simultaneously. "I do hope you'll eat it while it's warm," Mrs. Hargrove said. "Meat is always best fresh." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and dear, I noticed you speaking with Mrs. Pemberton. Such a warrior, that woman. Always seeing darkness where there's only hunger." After she'd gone, Thomas lifted the cover. Inside was a stew so dark it was almost black, fragrant with familiar herbs. "We're not eating that," I said. We argued. He stormed out to walk off his anger. I was alone with the stew. As I stared at it, I noticed something pale floating near the surface. I fetched a spoon with trembling hands, fished it out. It was a fingernail. Small, yellowed with age, but distinctly human. I vomited into the sink. Then I took the entire dish and buried it in the woods behind our cottage. When Thomas returned, I showed him the nail. His face went gray. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I'll inquire about transfer options." But that night we heard her. Digging. In the patch of woods where I'd buried the stew, we heard the rhythmic sound of a spade biting earth. And beneath it, a sound like hunger-given voice. When dawn came, we went to look. The earth was torn open, the empty dish licked clean and placed on our back doorstep. And pressed into the soft ground were footprints. Bare footprints. With too many toes. I should have left that morning. Thomas wanted to. He'd already started packing, his hands shaking. But I couldn't stop thinking about Harold Hargrove's disappearance, about those hooks I'd glimpsed in the cellar, about all the others who'd vanished without a trace. Someone needed to know the truth. "I'm going to the police," I told Thomas. The police station was 12 miles away. The constable was a florid man with skeptical eyes. He listened to my story with barely concealed impatience. "Could be from anyone," he said, examining the fingernail. "Old people's nails fall off sometimes." "But the footprints. Tracks in mud can look like anything in the dark. Mrs. Hargrove's eccentric, but eccentric isn't criminal. You've been in Millbrook 1 week, and already you're seeing monsters in a lonely old woman who's shown you nothing but hospitality. Perhaps village life doesn't suit you." He dismissed me with patronizing sympathy. The bus ride back felt like traveling toward my own grave. Our cottage was dark when I arrived. "Thomas," I called out. The smell hit me first. That same smell from Mrs. Hargrove's cottage. Thomas was sitting at our kitchen table. Mrs. Hargrove sat across from him. Between them was a fresh pot of stew. "Darling," Thomas said, his voice strangely flat, his eyes unfocused. "Mrs. Hargrove has been keeping me company." His bowl was empty, scraped clean. Mrs. Hargrove smiled at me, and in the dim light, I saw her clearly for the first time. Her shadow didn't match her body. It was larger, hunched, with limbs that bent wrong. And in that shadow, I saw movement, things writhing beneath the surface. "You shouldn't have gone to the police," she said pleasantly. "After I've been so welcoming. Your husband understands. He's eaten enough of my cooking to understand. The meat changes you, gets inside you, makes you part of the feast." Thomas's face was sweating, but he didn't move. Couldn't move. I could see the struggle in his eyes. "What did you do to him?" "What I've been doing for 8 years. Since Harold died. You simply cook for them, feed them, let them come to you willingly. The meat does the rest, gets in their blood, makes them docile, tender." She stood, her movements fluid and wrong. "But you, dear, you barely ate. I'll have to prepare you the old way." She moved toward me impossibly fast. I grabbed the cast iron pan from the stove and swung it with all my strength. It connected with her temple with a sound like cracking wood. She dropped but didn't fall. Just paused. Tilted her head, touching the wound where dark fluid leaked. She brought her fingers to her mouth, tasted her own blood, and smiled. "That's the spirit. The fear makes the meat sweeter." I ran. Out the door, into the dusk, her laughter following me. I heard Thomas cry out behind me, his voice breaking with effort. I didn't stop. I ran to the only place I thought might offer answers, Mrs. Hargrove's cottage. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lamps were lit, casting their dim, hungry light. I found the cellar door. The padlock was hanging open, inviting me. The stairs descended into darkness. I'd grabbed a lamp from the hallway, and its light threw wild shadows on the stone walls. The smell down here was overwhelming, earth and meat and decay and something ancient. The cellar was larger than it should have been. The floor was stained dark with layers of old blood. Hanging from the ceiling beams were hooks. Dozens of them. Some were empty. Some weren't. I won't describe what hung there, but I know I saw clothes. Peter Morley's work jacket, the surveyor's leather bag, and older things that might have belonged to any of the disappeared. And then I saw Harold, or what was left of him. He'd been preserved somehow, his body dried and shrunken, his mouth open in an eternal scream. But he wasn't dead. His eyes moved when my lamp light touched them, rolling in their sockets to fix on me with desperate, insane hope. He'd been here 8 years. Conscious. Preserved. Sustaining her whenever she grew hungry. Footsteps crossed the floor above, heading toward the cellar door. Mrs. Hargrove was coming home. The lamplight found something else, a tunnel entrance, partially hidden behind a shelf of preserving jars. The bricks around it were loose, scratched where someone had clawed away at the mortar. Harold had been trying to escape. "Come out, dear," her voice sing-songed from the stairs. "I promise it won't hurt. Much." I squeezed into the tunnel. It was barely wide enough, earth pressing in on all sides. I'd had to leave the lamp behind, and now I moved blind, pulling myself forward on my elbows, my breath coming in panicked sobs. Behind me, I heard her enter the tunnel, heard her moving faster than should be possible. "You should have eaten more," her voice echoed. "Would have been so much easier." My hand broke through into open air. I pulled myself forward desperately and realized I was in a root cellar. Mrs. Hargrove's root cellar, directly beneath her garden. I'd crawled in a circle. The laugh from the tunnel behind me was rich with satisfaction. Clever Harold. He almost made it out. But the tunnel doesn't go anywhere useful. I fumbled in the darkness, my hands finding a garden spade. I gripped it, backed away from the tunnel entrance, raising it as her shape emerged. She wasn't bothering to look human anymore. What crawled out was something that had worn Mrs. Hargrove's skin. Too many limbs, too many joints, a mouth that split her face nearly in half. 8 years I've been so careful, playing the kind neighbor. But you had to be suspicious. Now I'll have to move again. She lunged. I swung the spade. It caught her in the side with a sound like hitting wet meat. She staggered, black fluid spurting, but didn't stop. I swung again, backing up the stairs toward the garden, toward air and light. We burst out into the night together. In the moonlight, I could see the village beyond her garden fence, windows lit, doors closed. "Help!" I screamed. "Someone help me." But no one came. They all knew, and they'd chosen to not see. "No one will help you," she said. "They never do." As she lunged again, her foot caught on a stone border. She stumbled, and I hit her with the spade, putting every ounce of fear behind it. She went down. And I ran. I made it to the crossroads before my body gave out. Collapsed there and looked back to see her coming, dragging herself forward, leaving a trail of black fluid. Then a pair of headlights swept around the corner. A truck, carrying late supplies. It couldn't stop in time. The impact sounded like meat and bone and something that screamed with voices that had no business in a human throat. The driver helped me to my feet and went to rouse the constable. By the time they broke into her cellar, Mrs. Hargrove's body had begun to decay rapidly, as if her true age was catching up. Within an hour, nothing remained but bones and rotted meat. But in her cellar, they found Harold, still alive, if you could call it living. They tried to save him, but he died within the day. He was smiling when he went. They burned her cottage to the ground. The village wanted no reminder. Thomas recovered, eventually. Whatever she'd put in the stew worked its way out of his system over the following weeks. We left Millbrook 3 days after they burned her cottage. Thomas secured a transfer to Yorkshire, and we started over. We never spoke about Millbrook. Not to each other, not to anyone. But I remember. God help me, I remember everything. I'm 93 now. Thomas has been gone these 15 years. I live alone in a quiet suburb outside Manchester, in a tidy little house with a garden where I grow herbs mint, thyme, basil, but never rosemary. Some nights, I still wake up tasting that stew. The richness of it, the satisfaction. And I wonder if Mrs. Hargrove was right. If once you've tasted certain things, you're changed forever. I tell myself I'm being ridiculous, that I ate one bowl 70 years ago, that whatever was in that meat is long gone, that the dreams are just dreams. But sometimes, when my neighbor Mrs. Chen brings me soup, I find myself studying her hands, the softness of them, wondering what she would taste like seasoned with sage and garlic. Sometimes when the teenage boy next door comes to mow my lawn, I watch him work from my kitchen window, and my mouth waters. Sometimes I go to the butcher and the ordinary meat smells wrong, and I come home empty-handed and sick with yearning for something I can't name but remember with perfect, terrible clarity. I've never acted on these thoughts. Never. I'm not Mrs. Hargrove. I'm not a monster. I've spent 70 years proving I'm not a monster. But 3 weeks ago, something happened. A young woman moved into the house across the street. Drifter type, no family, traveling for work, doesn't stay anywhere long. She's thin and looks lonely. Sometimes I see her sitting on her front step, smoking cigarettes and staring at nothing, and she reminds me of Peter Morley. Of all the lonely ones Mrs. Hargrove chose. Last Tuesday, I invited her to dinner. I didn't plan to. The words just came out, and she accepted with surprised gratitude. And I smiled and told her I'd make something special. My signature stew. I haven't cooked a stew in 70 years. But apparently, I remembered the recipe perfectly. I spent all day Wednesday preparing it. Bought the meat from 3 different butchers. Ordinary beef, I told myself. Just ordinary beef. Seasoned it with herbs from my garden. No rosemary, I promised myself. But when the stew was simmering and I tasted it, something was missing. That perfect flavor from memory was almost there, but not quite. My hand reached for the rosemary before my brain could stop it. The smell that filled my kitchen made me want to weep. Made me want to feast. Made me understand, finally, what Mrs. Hargrove had been. Sometimes I wonder if what the truck hit was just another shell, another suit of skin she wore. Wonder if she's somewhere now, in another village, inviting lonely neighbors to dinner. Sometimes I wonder if she left something behind in that stew. A curse, an infection, a change in the blood that waits dormant until circumstances align. The young woman across the street is coming for dinner tonight. I've set the table for 2. The stew is ready, rich and dark and fragrant. The house smells wonderful, welcoming. I'm not going to hurt her. I'm not. I'm just a lonely old woman who wants company, who wants to recapture just for one evening the warmth I felt in Mrs. Hargrove's cottage. Before I knew. That's all this is. I've been checking the stew every few minutes, and I've noticed something I didn't remember doing. 3 bowls are set out on the counter. Not 2, 3. I live alone. The young woman makes 2. So who's the 3rd bowl for? I've checked every room. I'm alone. But the bowl is there, and some part of me, the part that's been whispering in the dark for 70 years, knows exactly who it's for. There's a knock at the door. I check my reflection in the kitchen window before I answer. I look normal. Small. Frail. A harmless old woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. My shadow behind me on the kitchen floor looks normal too. Mostly normal. There's another knock, more insistent. I stir the stew one more time. A piece of meat breaks the surface, and in the dim evening light, I can't quite tell what kind it is. Probably beef. Almost certainly beef, but it smells like Mrs. Hargrove's stew smelled. The knocking stops. I hear her footsteps moving away from my door. I could let her go. Could pour this stew down the drain. Could go back to being just a harmless old woman who slowly fades away into ordinary death. Could. But my feet are already moving toward the door, and my voice is calling out warm and friendly. Oh, don't go, dear. I'm sorry. I was just finishing up. Please, come in. I've made something special. I open the door and she turns back, smiling uncertainly. Young. Healthy. Alone. Perfect. It smells wonderful, she says, stepping inside. Thank you. I hear myself reply. It's an old family recipe. My special stew. I hope you're hungry. Behind me, in my reflection in the hallway mirror, I catch a glimpse of my shadow on the wall. It's larger than it should be. The proportions aren't quite right. And for just a moment, I see something in that shadow, too many limbs, a mouth that splits too wide before it shifts back to ordinary old woman shape. Starving, the young woman says. Wonderful, I say, leading her toward the kitchen. That's just wonderful. And I mean it. God help me, I mean it. In the kitchen, 3 bowls wait to be filled. She'll eat from one. I'll pretend to eat from another. And the 3rd bowl will sit there at the empty place at our table, waiting for the guest who's been here all along. The hunger.
patient, ancient, passed down like a recipe, and I've finally stopped pretending I'm strong enough to resist it. I ladle the stew into her bowl first, generous with the meat. She picks up her spoon, brings it to her lips, tastes. Oh my God, she breathes. This is incredible. What's your secret? I smile. It feels natural now. Right. The secret, I tell her, is in choosing the right ingredients. And in the seasoning. Rosemary especially. It masks the flavor of things that might otherwise seem unusual. She doesn't understand yet. Won't until it's far too late. Because as I watch her eat, as I see the pleasure spreading across her face, I understand finally what Mrs. Hargrove understood. The hunger doesn't die. It just waits. It's patient. It knows that eventually, after enough lonely nights, eventually you'll remember how good it felt, and you'll set a place at your table for the hunger you've been trying to forget. The young woman finishes her first bowl and asks for seconds. I smile and serve her, generous with the portions. There's plenty, I assure her. I always make extra. The third bowl sits between us, still empty, waiting. Any moment now, I'll hear the scrape of a chair being pulled back. Any moment now, the hunger will introduce itself properly to its newest host, and the cycle will begin again, as it has for however many years in however many villages, wearing however many faces. I ladle stew into my own bowl and lift a spoonful to my lips. It tastes like coming home. It tastes like surrender. The young woman is laughing, telling me a story, but I'm barely listening. I'm watching her shadow on the wall behind her, watching for the moment it starts to change. It won't be tonight. Might not be for years. The hunger is patient, but it's already there, already inside her, already waiting, just like it's been waiting inside me. 70 years I've fought it. 70 years I've told myself I was stronger than Mrs. Hargrove. But the truth is simpler and more terrible. I was just slower to give in. Tomorrow morning, they'll see me working in my garden, waving hello to the mailman. Just a harmless old woman. And when the next drifter comes to town, I'll be ready with another invitation, another special recipe. Because the hunger remembers even when we forget. And it's always, always patient. The young woman asks if I'm all right, says I've gone quiet. I blink, smile, apologize. Just remembering, I tell her. Just remembering an old friend who taught me to cook. She must have been an amazing teacher. She was, I agree. She taught me everything I know. The third bowl is no longer empty. Something dark and rich fills it now, though I never saw it poured. The chair across from us is no longer vacant. Something sits there, not quite visible, not quite real, but present nonetheless. Patient, hungry, waiting. And I can feel it smiling. Can feel Mrs. Hargrove smiling through it, wherever she is, whatever she's become. Because she won. In the end, despite everything, she won. The young woman doesn't notice the third presence at our table, but she will. Eventually. When she's old like me, when she invites her own lonely stranger to dinner, she'll see it then. She'll understand. And the cycle will continue, as it always has, one bowl at a time, one invitation at a time. I raise my spoon to my lips and taste the future. It's delicious.